So my maintenance policy, I want to be sure to acknowledge a server before I reboot one. So that's what I'm going to assign. Now, do I want to assign it to a server? That's something that I'm going to do later. What else am I going to configure here? That is my firmware package. So here I can set the two firmware packages that I created, both for the CIMC and for the host itself. Next, and finally, I can place all my other policies like the BIOS policy, the scrub policy, and everything else that I can configure, including the management IP of the service profile. Like I said, I give an IP address to a blade. Additionally, I can give an IP address to the service profile, because that will migrate with the service profile once it's migrating to different servers. So in this case, I'm going to set this to none because I don't care that the service profile has an own IP address. Finish. So I created my first service profile template based on fiber channel boot. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to associate this template to one of the servers, because that will take some time. Those settings need to be programmed on the server, right? So that takes time. It needs to upgrade firmware or downgrade firmware when necessary. In this case, it's not, because I'm already running the same version, but that takes time. So I'm going to associate it. First of all, I'm going to create a profile. So that creation of the profile brings me into this window saying, how many profiles do you want? Well, I just want one profile that is called FC boot server. Give it a name. Make sure that you use the exact name that Cisco specifies in the lab. Now, as soon as I created this, it created that service profile for me. And now you see that it allocated a UUID on the pool, from the pool. It allocated MAC addresses from the pool. You see AA, AA, and BB. It allocated worldwide port names from the pool. So now that I created an actual service profile, I actually drain resources from the pool. That's what I'm doing here. Draining resources from the pool because I now have an actual service profile. Because this is an updating template, it is now connected to the service profile. That means I cannot change anything in the service profile here. Everything is grayed out, because I can only change the template to make changes active again. So here on the template, I can change anything. Everything is just active for me to change that. As soon as I change it, of course, that will update my service profile then. That's what I'm doing here. So because this connection is in place, I'm connecting constantly to my service profile to see if there are any changes. So let's associate this service profile to a piece of hardware. And I'm going to take blade number 1 for that. Click OK. Now, this is going to cause a reboot of blade 1. Of course, because this is a pretty impacting change, right? Of course I want to do that. And now I'm associating the settings towards the servers. And it says here configuration state. So let's see what it's doing by viewing the actual KVM session. So there are two ways to monitor the progress of your association. I usually check both. And again, this takes time, so be patient. So it's booting the server right now, but I'm not very interested in that. What I am interested in what it's actually doing. I can see that in the tab called FSM. Here I can see exactly what it is doing in terms of the association to the service profile. But this is a very good way to demonstrate how you can see what the server is doing. So follow this, and this is going to take maybe 10 minutes to associate. So again, time you lose in the lab for associating servers. And of course you can do other things like go into your administration configuration. All right. So what I want to do before we go for lunch is I want to create a second service profile template for iSCSI boot. So let's start creating another service profile template. I'm going to call this the SP template iSCSI. I'm going to make it an initial template. I'm not going to make it updating this time. As you can see, when I select the pool, you see that I drained resources from the pool because now I only have 15 out of the 16 UUIDs available. Next. Well, storage is actually very simple here. I want to use any configuration for my local disks, but VHBAs, I do not need them now. I do not need fiber channel access because I will be configuring iSCSI boot. Of course, I need the expert way in configuring Ethernet right now because I need those iSCSI VNICs. So I'm first going to create just VNIC 0, like I did on the previous one. Data 1, VNIC 1, data B, and VNIC 3 or VNIC 2 for the DMZ. So 3 VNICs. Now I want to start creating my initiator VNICs. Remember what I called the iSCSI VNIC in the boot policy? That was iSCSI 1. So be sure to have that name equal to how your boot policy is configured here. The overlay VNIC is the VNIC that I'm going to use to pin that traffic to. Remember what I said here earlier? This guy, this VNIC, I'm going to hijack that VNIC and place a connectivity path here to lay my iSCSI initiator VNIC on top of the other VNIC. So this VNIC, in my case, is going to be VNIC 0. So VNIC 0 is the one that I'm going to select here. And then I need to specify which VLAN on that VNIC. So it's going to take a look at the VNIC configuration and see what VLANs are supported here. Now, I'm using VLAN 501 for iSCSI. So that's the VLAN that I'm going to use. And that is going to be the VLAN tag that this iSCSI VNIC is going to use. So this guy is going to send traffic now with tag 501 to the VNIC, and then the VNIC can forward it out towards the network. Then, do I want to specify a separate MAC address for this VNIC? Usually you do not want that. Just leave it at none. Let it inherit the MAC address from the VNIC itself. There used to be a bug where this wouldn't work properly. Hello. There we go. Take some time here. I guess it is stuck at some point. Uh-oh. Ah, there we go again. So we had a little bit of a hiccup with So what I did here is configure that iSCSI overlay VNIC, connected it to my actual traffic VNIC, and specified the VLAN that I want to send traffic in. That's all I need to do in terms of networking. So I go next, I let the system perform the placement, I don't care about that right now. Now I want to specify the iSCSI boot policy. And because I have that iSCSI boot policy here, what I need to do is set the parameters. This cannot be set in the boot policy, this has to be set in the service profile template. So I get a new window where I can first say authenticated, well that's not necessary. What is the IQN? I'm going to use the pool for that. What is the IP address? Take that from the pool or use that statically or with DHCP. So give it a virtual address, so give it a logical address and give it an identifier. That's what I'm saying here. And then the last target, which disk do you want to boot? So which target do you want to boot? What was the target name again? The IQN of the disk. What's the IP address of that particular target? That is the IP address of the MDS switch, in my case, because that's my iSCSI target. So you configure the IQN, configure the IP address, and click OK. That is my iSCSI boot configuration. Configure the identifier, configure the IP address, and do the same for your target. Configure the identifier, configure the IP address. That is how I configure iSCSI boot. Use an acknowledgement. Well, I don't really care about firmware right now. Let's just finish it. Question? Sure. VNIC 0 is tied to Fabric A. That is correct. So what about fabric failure? What I now did was configure just a single fabric iSCSI boot. I can also do this twice, right? So if I create multiple iSCSI VNICs, I can tie them to different links. And for each of the iSCSI VNICs, I can set those boot parameters that you saw me doing. So for each of the iSCSI VNICs, each of them has its own IP address and each of them has its own IQN. Each of them are using a different target. So just like with Fibre Channel boot, you have that multiple target that I specify. Same thing with iSCSI. Click the iSCSI VNIC, set the boot parameters. Click this next iSCSI VNIC, click the boot parameters. Different things. So now to keep it simple, I'm just using one iSCSI VNIC. And it's going to boot through that iSCSI VNIC. Let's create a service profile out of this. Call this iSCSI boot 1. Only one service profile. Now the iSCSI VNIC has been assigned. I'm assigning some MAC addresses. And for the boot parameters, always check what it did. Because I've had situations where the pool of addresses was not correctly assigned. So I had to redo the pool assigning, for example, and redo the IQN assigning. So sometimes this doesn't work very well. In this case, you can see the exact IQN here. that 2013 1213 colon UCS blade colon 0. That's exactly the one that I was specifying here, right? 2013 1213 colon UCS blade. Yeah, exactly the same. So I have a configuration issue. Invalid setting for MAC address, VLAN, overlay VNIC, or invalid initiator identity. Why is that? I'm using overlay VNIC 0. Maybe I do need to specify a MAC address. Let's see if it works now. iSCSI configuration issue. Why is it wrong? It is using Fabric A, that is good. The MAC address is used. I use a VLAN. It might be that it has to use the native VLAN, that it does not support VLAN tagging. So if I go to my VNIC template to data A, I'm going to set VLAN 501 to be the native VLAN. That could be the reason. Native, it sees that now. Yeah, now it will work. So what it is, the issue is, so like I said, in UCS 2.0 this feature was created, and there are some things that are not fully working. So first of all, when specifying a MAC address to the iSCSI VNIC, never do that. Doesn't work. Just let it inherit the MAC address to the VNIC. And second, it doesn't support VLAN tagging. So that VLAN 501 has to be the native VLAN on the VNIC. So my iSCSI VNIC should have the iSCSI VLAN as its native VLAN. That is the case. So usually you will create a separate VNIC and then a separate iSCSI VNIC just for your iSCSI boot. That's what you typically do. So I usually take a data VNIC and an iSCSI VNIC, and then a VNIC dedicated for iSCSI, then use that overlay iSCSI VNIC running across. So with only the iSCSI VLAN to be the active VLAN there. But those two things are aware. So never use a MAC address on your iSCSI VNIC, although the option is there. And use native VLAN tagging. And now I can successfully apply the service profile.